Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Feeling Lighter podcast. I'm Katie here with the fabulous Lisa. Hi, Lisa.
Hello, hello.
As a reminder, we have this podcast because we are shedding old beliefs that no longer serve us, one episode at a time. Because the bottom line is we are discovering that how you feel about yourself changes everything in your life.
Absolutely.
Not how other people feel about you. My biggest life lesson. So we have a wonderful guest today. We're gonna shed some old beliefs. Let's get started, Lisa. I'm excited about this topic.
Me too. All right, today we have Khanyisa Mnyaka. She's a certified life coach, author, TEDx speaker, and content creator. Khanyisa was born and raised in South Africa, and for the past 4 years, she has called the United States home. Her first book, Traveling While Black and Lesbian, is a travel-focused memoir where Khanyisa takes us into her journey as a Black, queer, African woman traveling the world. She shares with us how these intersectional identities played out in each country she traveled to or lived in. In her second book, You Belong Here, Your Roadmap to Confidence, Purpose, and Authenticity, Khanyisa taps into her own life with vulnerability and storytelling, guides us into living more empowered and authentic lives. Khanyisa spends most of her time coaching her clients, doing speaking engagements, and traveling. Welcome. Thank you so much for being on our podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
I'm so excited to be here. I was looking forward to this.
Good. Same.
You know, before Lisa and I do these episodes, we each write our own questions, and then we come together and we review the questions. And I just want to, I'm just going to jump right in. My first question was, radical self-love seems unachievable. Help. It's actually not really a question. It's sort of a call for help.
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 Well,
maybe we'll start with that concept.
Okay, well, let's go right into it. I grew up, I talk about it in both my books. I grew up queer, Black in South Africa. And also I grew up in the church. And so when you are queer in the church, there are so many conflicting messages about who you are, right? And when people speak about authenticity, I remember being in high school back home and watching Oprah, and she was like, be authentic. And I was like, I don't know if I even love or like myself. And so as I started my own journey of sort of like becoming and owning my story and loving myself, I was like, well, how do I love the parts that I thought were unlovable? And that's when I was like, I want to radically love myself. And that means loving all of me. I think when we talk about self-love, we think about like, the trip with the girls to the spa, or, like the stuff that we do, which is all like the self-care stuff, which is all beautiful. But what I wanted to sort of do for myself and for others as well is like, how do we see these parts of ourselves that we want to change? But instead of loathing ourselves into that change, we can look at something that we're uncomfortable with and say, you know what, I'm going to learn how to love you. And then I'm going to change you from that perspective of loving you. So radical self-love for me is really being like, I see myself as a full human being, and everything is worth loving, even those that I still want to grow and change from.
Ooh, I like that. And I think it's tough too, because we live, I think especially now, in a society where, self-help and changing yourself and fixing yourself is like, some of us, it's our part-time job or full-time job, right? It's like I always tell people, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with like developing, right? Growing, getting smarter, getting stronger, owning who you are. But I'm not a constant project to be fixed. Like I'm fine as I
love
am.
that.
And it sounds like, this radical self-love is accepting the parts of you, even the underdeveloped areas, even the areas you're maybe not super proud of or, you want to work on. But it doesn't have to be like you always say, throwing the baby out with the bathtub. Like you can still accept and love who you are while you're working and growing and developing. So
I think that's like such a beautiful place to change. And I think it's also like such a sustainable place to change. Like I also use the word change, like I call it a journey versus work, because work sounds like, oh, it can be like, oh, I'm in this self-development work. Like there's so much like pressure on it.
Right.
And I think the lightness is recognizing, A, that I'm not broken. I've never
Yeah.
been broken. Maybe I'm in pain. Maybe things happen to me that have me be where I am uncomfortable. But I'm not, I love that. I'm not a project. I don't need to be fixed. Maybe I'm in pain and I need to heal. Maybe there are parts of me that I wish were different, and I can work to make those things different.
I mean, when you were offering that beautiful definition of radical self love, I kept hearing the word perfectionism and how, like, that perfectionism of I'm showing up as I thought I should, and when
Right.
I'm not doing it that way, I'm just using like judgment and criticism
Mm,
to quote unquote fix myself. And I agree with what you're saying, Lisa, around it's a tricky
hmm
time because we do have a lot of self-help and a lot of like, okay, it's almost like there are a lot of people in our culture now who are coming to this point where they're like, I don't know that I love the way it's been done and I want to do it a different way. But
hmm
I think that that's a beautiful thing.
hmm
And we also have to be
hmm
careful because I think we can get trapped in this cycle of, like you said, fixing, fixing, fixing,
All
fixing.
the
And
time.
that can be
hmm
really exhausting. And
Yeah.
it also made me think about like when people come to use our reshape fitness product. I just want to tell them, like, you're not going to hate yourself like healthy,
To healthy, right.
like it's not,
No.
but it's hard to I always think about that. It's so I don't know if you both feel this, but like I feel the deep ingrained wires, and it's like, I feel how deep those are ingrained. And so
hmm
I think I love your approach of, yeah, acknowledge it and don't hate it.
Yeah.
We're not going to hate ourselves to like this unwiring. So I just really
No.
appreciate that example that you give, or that definition you give.
Yeah. Yeah. It's helped me a lot actually. Like um in sort of like shedding my own stuff. I know I listened to a few episodes of the podcast, and I was like, I love this so much because we approach things in a very like, there's something wrong with you. You go be disciplined and go change and go get fixed. And what that has missed for me and a lot of people is like, I didn't wake up not loving myself. I didn't wake up
Right.
believing the stuff that I believe about myself. Like someone told me those things, whether directly or indirectly. I've been through stuff that created this person that I am, and it's not going to take hate to make me different. It's going to take a lot of acknowledgement of the pain that I've been through, the trauma that I've been through, the beliefs that no longer serve me, that I still
Right.
struggle to let go of. Even though I know that these don't serve me anymore, it still takes intentional processes to unlearn that stuff. And for some of us, it's from when we were young kids. Like I grew up in a household where I was told I'm going to grow up and marry a man and have children and like and be happy ever after, which is completely antithesis to who I am, and still
Right.
holding on to that internal homophobia that it lived in my body for a very long time, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that stuff doesn't just go away because, different. Like, that you're not that person. It doesn't mean that the voices and the things that you've heard your entire life no longer impact you. And along those same lines, you talk a lot about overcoming people pleasing and that sort of being one of the keys to unlocking your authenticity. Can you talk about your journey with people pleasing? I'm sure it started for a lot of people, it starts in like childhood, right?
Oh
Because we
my
get
God,
these
yeah.
messages from adults, especially
Oh
as
my God,
children.
yeah.
But how is
Yeah.
that sort of unraveled for you, this idea of letting go of people pleasing so you can be who you are truly meant to be?
Ah, do I have time? Um, I actually, my TEDx talk is on people pleasing. It's really
Ah,
about the cost of people pleasing. And I started to recognize it mostly in my romantic relationships, where I was like, oh, this is something that I have to really pay attention to, because I would find myself sort of consenting to things that felt very uncomfortable in my body. I'm somebody that really listens to their body. And I think you can even ask your body how, like, communicate, and you feel that anxiety, but you say yes anyway. And the way that I've tracked it for myself was like going way back. I'm like, where does this come from? Why can't I just go, no, I don't want to do that. That doesn't feel good. And for me, it was fear of being abandoned, fear of being rejected. I'm an open book, like all these things are in the book. When I was 9 years old, I watched my grandfather die. It was the first time that Black South Africans were allowed to vote, and he woke up that morning, he went and he voted, and he came home and he died in his garden. And we were very close. So that was like my first like deep abandonment wound. And I feel like everything when it comes to that fear of rejection and abandonment, that when people, like, we don't just become people pleasers, right? Like, there's a fear that if I don't consent, if I don't appease, I'm going to lose the person and I'm going to lose the relationship. So I'm going to do everything I can not to. And then that went into like watching my mom. I talk about my mom is like the foundation of the TEDx story, where she died at 36. I'm 39 now, and I'm like, just to think that I've outlived my mom and I'm only 39 years old is insane. And she died from HIV and AIDS, like at the peak of the HIV and AIDS pandemic in South Africa. And, part of her story was being in the super toxic relationship that she kept being asked to stay and persevere. And through people pleasing, she stayed in this like really, really toxic situation. So I honestly still call myself a recovering people pleaser. And because I do still have moments where I say yes to things and my body's like, that wasn't great. And I I'm like, actually, that's going to be a no, right? It's this journey that I'm constantly on. And when we use the word overcome, I like it because it sounds like, yeah, I've overcome. And I also think that sometimes it takes away from self-compassion, because when you actually do step into those things that you think you overcame, you can turn into a shame spiral, right? So like language is so important, and language is it defines us in a lot of ways. So yeah, that's been my relationship with people pleasing.
Wow.
I mean, people pleasing.
Yeah.
Lisa and I went to dinner last night, actually, and we were talking a lot about our mothers and our grandmothers, ironically, and how, this stuff doesn't just like start. We don't just start fresh, and that didn't happen. It's just passed down and passed down and passed down. Right. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that. And this is the other tricky thing that I think it's a little bit complicated, is that when those are the messages that you learn as a very small child, that feels normal to you.
Yep.
And so then there's this like conflict in for me, and it sounds like this is what you're saying too. It's like always been a little bit of a feeling in my body. It's like my mind is telling me what I learned and my body is telling me that doesn't feel right. But it's hard when you have normalized those behaviors.
Absolutely.
Because you're like, everyone around me is telling me that this is how I should live my life.
Yeah.
Society, parents, friends, but I don't feel right about it. And I feel like, I just want to commend your bravery.
Right.
For saying no. And for saying, like, I just need to have the courage. I mean, it takes so much courage to be on the journey that you have been on and basically go against everything that you were told you should be. So I just want to offer you some just love for taking incredible courage. It's a lot of courage.
I received that love. And, there's something that's coming up that I kind of want to share with the audiences. It's like, one of the things that you said is like, it from when we were young, I was that kid where people would be like, why can't you just be like her to their kids? Right? Like, why can't you just be like Khanyisa? Why aren't you just in school? And what that does to that model child is make you a people pleaser. It makes you a perfectionist. It leaves no room for mistakes, because you are now this exemplary human being. You are this mirror that gets held up on everybody. And that pressure also leads to people pleasing.
That is such a good point. Yeah, I can definitely relate. I was the oldest of 6 children. My parents, a lot of chaos in my home, and my goal was to achieve. That was my way out. And that was, I was proudly the example, like the model. My mother used to call me and my sister Stepford children. She's like, you guys are just perfect and it's annoying. That's what she would say. Like, and I remember liking that for a while. And then I remember the pressure, when the pressure set in and when it started to feel overwhelming. And when I was like, I can't actually keep this up. I don't even know who I actually am. And that is such an overwhelming feeling, especially when you're young and you're still trying to figure it out. So I totally get that. I'm glad that you share that. I want to go back, well, within the same context of people pleasing. You talk about yours coming up in partnerships, and you also mentioned your mother's in partnerships. What do you think it is? I mean, I have some ideas, but I want to hear from you. What do you think it's that women seek so much approval in their relationships, and how the people pleasing plays out there? But why do you think that is, especially for women, why we start to seek so much of our approval and our value from these, often romantic relationships, but just romance or relationships in general?
Hollywood. I think
We talked about that last night too. Freaking TV, movies.
movies, they really mess us up. They give us this like very
They do.
unrealistic idea and ideals of what love and relationships should look like. But I think for a lot of women, I'm deep on context. So the context that I can speak on is the one that I know, which is like growing up in a Black household and the messages of those gender roles, right? Like what does a
Right.
mom do and what does a dad do, right? And you watch your mom practice this like overstretching, overgiving, self-sacrificing. And there are people being looking at her being like, that's how you do in relationships. That's how much you give. You become selfish. You become everything to can you like conceptualize that? Like being everything to somebody. That
Everything.
is
Yeah.
just so unreal. And so I think we watch that, we are creatures of we mimic life. And sometimes we even mimic the stuff that we don't like because it's all we know. So I think it's like watching relationships being modeled to us. I also think it is what comes up a lot with my clients that makes me kind of sad is like the embarrassment women feel when their relationships don't work. And it's that holding on to a sinking ship, knowing that you're going to drown because you are embarrassed. What will people say if I end this relationship? I've been there. I did that. I was an Instagram couple one time, and don't recommend it. But that
She says
embarrassment,
0 stars. Do not recommend.
do not do that. But it is that embarrassment. It is that like, what will people say? I remember like, in Xhosa, it's bazothina bantu. There was never like an event, a moment where we didn't go, what will people say? Let's do it this way because what will people say if that happens? Persevere because what will people say if you return home, right? Like all of these messages that they keep us in some really harmful, toxic relationships.
And I mean, we were talking about this is kind of weird, actually.
Is very
We were talking about this last night too when I said,
Were you with us last night?
Alignment. I love it.
I mean, I feel like for a while I was scared to even share with anyone about what my ideal partnership looks like because it's so against traditional marriage, and I feel like I never want to place judgment on other people who love that path. It's more about just sitting in what felt good for me, and for me it's always been, what does it look like if I show up as my authentic self, not the version that you want me to be, and you show up as your authentic self, not the version that I want you to be, and we give each other that gift. And it's okay if that next version of self is not aligned with that next version of yourself.
Right.
And we release each other in love. Like, that is an okay path, but it's not really
Beautiful.
accepted.
No, it's not.
Right? Because what do we value in sort of our traditional culture is, well, how long have you been married?
Yeah.
And
How
I'm
long?
like, I really, you know,
Yeah.
I don't love that metric. I'm like,
That's like quantity over quality.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
it's also like when people get divorced, it's like it's always assumed that that's going to be like a point of contention between people. And it often is, because we don't have we have viewed it as this bad thing.
Right.
And so I just feel like it's all an illusion to me. Like, how do we even know what
Yeah.
tomorrow's going to be? How do I know? So I just think giving each other permission to be their most authentic self, and even if that next version of you doesn't align with me, that might be hard, but like life will still go on.
Yeah.
I can feel myself being like, oh, with that one. I released like one of the videos that people loved on my Instagram. I was like, when we talk about being breadcrumbed, and I thought about like on the perspective of this person who is doing the breadcrumbing, right? Sometimes you have someone saying, I don't feel like I'm breadcrumbing you. I'm giving you everything that I have. Everything.
Right.
Like, to me, this is everything that I have. But to you, it's not enough. And how do you lovingly let someone go? Recognizing that, yes, you're doing the best that you can, but because I love myself and I choose myself always, that is not enough for me. And it is okay for me to lovingly separate from you and be grateful. Thank you that you're giving me all that you can, all that you have. It's just not enough for me. And I think that's what you're saying. Like, as we're growing and evolving, like, I'm not who I was last year.
No.
Right? I'm different. I hope so. Oh my God, then I would be worried.
Right.
Yeah.
And and then how do I remain in partnership with someone who knows a past version of me that no longer serves either of us in this relationship?
We hang on tight. My partner and I have always had a therapist, and we've had a couple throughout the years. But one of the reasons we chose this last therapist that we've been working with is I often feel that some therapists, not all, define the success of their therapy as a couple staying together.
Yep.
And this therapist that I found is like, absolutely not. I actually have an entire program I've developed for uncoupling, and when people are ready to move out of the relationship in respect and in love. And I thought, wow, this is, I wish that our whole culture
I
could
like
move in this
that.
direction. Yeah. So
I like that approach.
I feel like we could, I know we're coming up on time. I wish we could talk forever.
I know.
But this is, we need to read I need to go, some of the chapters, like Lisa was saying, that are in your book sound just absolutely wonderful. So we'll make sure we put a link for our listeners. I know you have another book
thank
too.
you.
So if you want to email us that, we'll put that in the link as well.
Okay.
But before we let you go, we have to ask you the big podcast question, which is, what is a belief that you once had that you no longer have that has impacted your life in a really big way?
I'm going to take a deep breath. The drama. I think we touched a bit on this, but for me, it was really connected to my worth, that I was worthy when I was performing. And that for me to be worthy, I had to be doing something that like love and acceptance and all these good things were available to me when I exchange something for it. And that was the belief. And now I think I'm just worthy as I am, that I don't have to perform for it. I don't have to be anyone that I'm not. I don't have to put on a mask to feel worthy, that by just being human and just being a child of the universe, that I'm worthy of love and goodness and kindness and abundance and everything that is available to everyone else, and that I'm not limited because I'm not performing.
That's beautiful. I always tell people your worthiness is inherent in your existence. That's it.
Absolutely.
You exist, so you're worthy.
So you're
I
worthy.
love how you put it. You don't have to pay for it.
You don't have to
No
pay for it.
monetary value, no performative value. That's beautiful. Can you tell our listeners how they can follow you, find you, work with you, support your work?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as Life Coach Khany. I'm also on TikTok as Life Coach Khany. My email, coachingbykm@gmail.com. And yeah, That's the best way to work with me. This was so I'm trying to find a word. My heart space is very open. It
Oh,
was so soft and beautiful. Thank you so much.
oh,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome. Thank
Again,
you.
I just want to reiterate your courage and bravery in your journey, and thank you for giving our listeners permission to be brave and be themselves. That's
Mm,
what we're trying to do around here for us, for ourselves, for
Right.
everyone. So the
thank
message
you.
is so aligned.
Thank you. I
Please
had
go.
a
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, one last thing. I actually spoke to a client of mine on Wednesday. They didn't know that I was coming on here. And they're like, "There's this app called Reshape, and I really like how they view fitness and all that." And I was like, "Oh
Oh,
my God, I'm talking to them." And she's like, "Yeah,
Oh
I'm
my
gonna start
God.
working." I know it was so random. It's like, I've been just hard on myself with my body and stuff, but I just love the way they view it and how, yeah. So
that is
I
beautiful, and I might cry.
I know I love those messages. I feel like the universe always talks to me at the right time. That is a gift that I
oh,
feel happens when I feel alignment, because WeShape is a startup company, so it sometimes it's hard,
yeah,
and so I often get these little messages
Mm-hmm.
that are like, "Keep going.
keep
This
going.
is fine. You're fine. Just
Yeah,
keep going. This is important."
yeah,
So I
yeah.
so appreciate that story more than you know. I really
Same.
do.
Oh, I'm glad I told you. It was great. Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you again for being our wonderful guest today, and we will
Thank you.
see everyone next week.
Bye bye.
Bye.